So, Father Laurence, it's a pleasure to have a chance to speak to you today and beg your pardon of asking quite a few personal questions because I think you've lived quite an interesting life. Thank you very much for being here.
It's a great pleasure to be with you and happy to respond as best I can to any question you want to throw. Thank you for the warning. That helps as well.
Sure. No problem. So the first question is about your childhood. If you could share a significant event from your childhood that helped you become who you are today.
I think if you don't mind, I'll cheat a little and offer three, if I can do that.
Absolutely, yeah.
The reason is that as I thought of one, it always seemed incomplete, but these three seem to form three facets of what is essentially one's life, which is one experience unfolding and with great diversity, but a mysterious unity. So anyway, the first of these was one of my very earliest memories. I can't even remember how old I was, very young. And I remember waiting for my mother to arrive by car or taxi to take me home. And I'd been separated from her for a while, so I was very excited about going home. And it was a very warm summer day and the air was filled with the scent of roses. And I can remember just the excitement of waiting for the car to arrive. And when it did, I was just, ecstatic, like a little child is. And hiding, I actually hid behind a tree for some reason, which always reminds me of the cloud of unknowing. It says about how we meditate. We hide from God in order to be able to find God. And that was a memory of what a great anticipation, great joy, and also great sensory memories. The scent of the roses and the smell of the car stayed with me all these many years. Mm. So it was maybe symbolizing the nature of real desire and the fulfillment of it. The second memory that came to mind was when I first heard about meditation in my first year at university, and I was meeting with my teacher, my spiritual teacher, John Main, Irish monk, and I'd gone to see him to discuss various questions in my life. And at the end of one of the conversations, he spoke about meditation quite unexpectedly and in a very light way, a light touch. And it wasn't, you've got to meditate, anything like that. It was really spreading this teaching before me or around me in a very light way. But at the same time, I knew it awakened something in my heart at a deeper level, which was also really a desire to enter into that experience of silence and of unity. It took me a few years after that to develop a proper practice, but nevertheless, that was a starting point. And I suppose the third one would be arriving here where I am at the moment at Bonneveau, which is our international center in France. About 3 years or so ago, we were looking for a new international center. And when we had looked at various places and recommendations, but nothing seemed to fit, and we were beginning to feel a little bit discouraged. And then we arrived here, and just when we turned the corner and saw Bonneveau, which is originally was a 12th century Benedictine monastery, we knew this is it. And it has to be here. Unfortunately, it took a lot of work and a lot of renovation. It's still going on, but it was a kind of clarity and a sense of homecoming. So I don't quite know how you put those three together, but there's an underlying theme, I think, between them.
Different ways of feeling at home, finding something of deep meaning and significance.
That's right, yes. It is about homecoming too. And in the Tibetan tradition, they speak about, I think the word for meditation means becoming familiar with yourself. And I think many people speak about meditation as a feeling of coming home.
It's like discovering who you are, these moments where you discovered who you are and how you interface with the greater world for a greater purpose. So very nice stories. So now I want to ask you a little bit more about your everyday life. Today, what do you derive the most satisfaction from and a feeling of benefiting others?
Well, I suppose I take pleasure in a lot of things, give me pleasure and joy, and music and literature and being part of nature. But I think in a more formal way, I would say probably meditation itself. Meditating is a great foundation and always new, always fresh, sometimes changeable, of course, in what the outer experience may be like, but essentially always this feeling of doing the right work and being involved in the right path. And of course, having your life rebalanced, reset. So I think meditation itself, just the practice, we meditate 4 times or more a day here. Secondly, I think seeing how meditation forms community, that's been a theme in my life, and one of the insights of the work that we do, that when people meditate together, it forms a community among those who do that. And it also awakens them to a sense of communion with others, wherever they are. So meditation forming community, and also I don't mean that in a sort of utopian way, because community is hard work, but I also see how meditation helps to nurture and heal the growth process of community and relationships. And thirdly, I would say meeting people, which is my privilege to be able to do a lot, to meet people and to live with people in whom the Spirit is perceptibly at work, shaping, reshaping, guiding without dominating, just that incredible, powerful influence of the Spirit that is at the same time liberating and not infantilizing or not in any way taking away the integrity of the person. Just in all of those, I think I would say there's a way of perceiving the experience of God.
Beautiful. And you've been an important part of expanding the role of meditation in Christianity. I'm curious what you mean by meditation from the Christian perspective, and how that's different or the same as prayer.
That's a good question, because it takes you to the heart of the issue, really. And I think for many Christians who haven't heard about meditation and are not aware of the contemplative tradition within Christianity, or think of it only as something outside of Christianity, who may still be stuck at a rather dualistic image of God, I think that's a question that they have to wrestle with, and it's a good question to face. Is meditation prayer? You often will ask that question.
Yeah.
And I think the answer is yes, and it's the whole of the contemplative spiritual tradition of Christianity to affirm that very centrally, although this contemplative dimension of Christian tradition got marginalized or became an object of suspicion even at different periods. So in fact, I was just looking today at the proofs of a book by one of our teachers, Sarah Bachelard, called Contemplative Christianity, some talks she gave at the John Main Seminar last year. It's a brilliant overview, really, of the emergence of a contemplative Christianity. Karl Rahner, one of the great theologians of the last century, said the Christian of the future will be mystical, or there will be no Christians. I would say specifically the answer to the question about meditation and prayer is that yes, of course, meditation is prayer, but it's the prayer of the heart, what the early Christian monks called pure prayer. So there are many forms of prayer. You could think of prayer as a big wheel with different spokes, and the different spokes representing the different forms of prayer, worship and scripture and petition or pilgrimage, or many different practices, spiritual practices. But at the heart of that wheel, there is a hub where all these spokes converge. And there you have what the Buddhists might say nothing. The Taoists might say nothing, but that nothing is the center of energy. You could also say this is the place, this is the heart, and the heart is where everything resides, according to the Upanishads. The whole universe is present in this tiny space, smallness in the heart. And in Christian language and in the scriptures, we would say, Christ in you. The prayer of Jesus is what matters, not my prayer. Anything that I could call my prayer has to be surrendered along with everything else that I call mine, as the ego gradually gets laid aside. So what's left then is just the prayer
Mm.
of the Spirit, which is what? For a Christian answer to that, we'd have to look at the idea of God as this communion of
Mm.
love and this dynamism of creativity and transcendence, and who knows, maybe even in some mysterious way, even suffering, at the heart of the divine, which creates everything. Meditation, you could say then, is our way into that prayer
Mm-hmm.
by making the journey from the mind to the heart.
That's very beautiful. It sounds like you're saying it's a way of letting go of your ego and making a direct connection to the universe and to God in some mystical way. Yeah.
It's direct, yes. You could look at meditation just as a way of reducing your blood pressure, and that's not a bad side effect. But as you found your blood pressure being reduced, you'd probably say, "Oh, I wonder what else it might be doing." You know?
That's actually a good moment to ask a little bit about science. Has scientific research informed your meditation and your contemplation in any way?
Yes and no. I'm not trained as a scientist. I was trained in literature and then later in theology, but literature is my first training, really. But that has led me to see science as maybe rather closer to poetry than many people might feel comfortable with. I think science searches for language and concepts to express its discoveries. But the act of discovery and the process of discovery and research and so on, and those moments of brilliant intuition that usually come to young scientists, which change the whole landscape of our worldview in science, that is a change in perception which calls for a change of language, a change of terms. And scientists are also, they have the language of mathematics, which is beautiful. I don't speak that language, but I respect it. But they also need other types of language and expression to communicate, articulate, make conscious what they are discovering.
Mm.
So anyway, yes, has science affected it didn't lead me to meditation, but the more I have been in dialogue with other religions, of course, but also with scientists, I'm fascinated by the research that's done. It disappoints me when that research becomes reductionistic.
Yeah.
And it says this is the explanation. Meditation is simply the combination of these processes or these neurons firing or these synapses. It always seems to me that these are metaphors to explain an experience that will always be receding. We'll never be able to pin this down. And
Yeah.
in that sense, it's very close to religion.
Yeah.
Because the religious person is seeking God. And the closer they come to God, the more they realize they're never going to be able to tackle him and get him to the ground. This is very obvious through the discovery of the quantum field in our time and how it relates to the other types of physics and Newtonian and worldviews, and how they relate to each other. And they may compete, they may argue, and Einstein didn't like some aspects of quantum theory and so on, but ultimately they are one aspect of human curiosity focused in the scientific. And I think the scientific research into meditation has been really interesting, but I don't think anybody has started to meditate or meditated for very long because they read a research paper on meditation, any more than somebody would get married because of reading a profile of somebody, of a candidate. But seeing how meditation clearly does touch the physical and the mental planes of human existence is fascinating. And I think that awakens a sense of wonder at the human itself, and with a sense of the spiritual and the non-dual. And in our time, where there are intelligent people proposing that the human race has failed in its project, and the only thing it can do now is to recreate itself by genetic engineering, It seems to me a statement of supreme stupidity, or that artificial intelligence that we are creating is going to take over and turn us into pets. James Lovelock, I think, says that. So I think these are disturbing ideas, seem to me not very persuasive when you look at them, but they can be very influential ideas, and they are really deeply undermining of human dignity and of human wonder. And
Yeah.
meditation has this great capacity to rehumanize us and to restore our sense of wonder.
I like what you said about science, what you appreciated about it is that it's a language, including the language of mathematics, that opens us up to the variety and wonder of the world. It's a nice way of saying that.
Mm.
There's one other question we wanted to ask. It's an aspirational question that if you could be granted one wish to solve a problem through the combination of science and contemplation, what problem would that be?
Well, maybe trust.
Mm.
We've become not just skeptical, but really at a loss for meaning.
Mm.
And we can see the breakdown of trust in the political process, in the communication of the news. We see the breakdown of trust and decency in the financial fields, as well as politics and public discourse. And so it's been happening progressively, but seems to have reached a peak at the moment. And if you look at what science technology, anyway, has given us, is this capacity to communicate,
Mhm.
to do what we're doing now
Yes. Yeah.
on Zoom, and to share that with others, and what we can do with social media, and yet how destructive we seem to use our technology, or how
Mm.
self-destructive we can be, and how addictive and undermining of human dignity our reliance on technology can be. That there are extremes either way.
Mhm.
We totally reject the spiritual and the human
Mhm.
in the way I was just describing. So let's roboticize the human on the one hand, or on the other hand, we become Luddites and want to destroy the machines that have also brought us a lot of benefits. So we need the technology. God knows during this pandemic, we need it. We need a cure and so on. We need to be able to communicate and do research. But we need to remember the primacy of the human. And this means, I think, a partnership really between contemplative scientists and scientifically respectful spiritual teachers
Mm.
and seekers. And it's a partnership which will be mutually beneficial. And at the heart of it is this extraordinary capacity of a contemplative practice, seriously, faithfully practiced, to rehumanize us and to help us to love and revere the humanity in each other.
Very nice. Yeah. So yeah, you started out by saying restore trust in each other and in our institutions. And you mentioned also respect, which seems essential to, to reestablishing trust. That's a very good aspiration and a nice place to end. Thank you so much, Father Laurence, for giving us a little bit of your time.
My pleasure. Thanks very much.